Ms Maxwell with a question, please.
Thank you, President. Hot topic today. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture, Ms Symes. As one of her fellow members from Northern Victoria, I commend her for her decision to expedite a visit to the Millewa region last week to inspect the effects of the crippling successive droughts there. The government has also recently announced that there is still financial support available for farmers through the On-Farm Drought Infrastructure Support Grant and the Pasture Recovery and Management Grant, and that the application period for the Farm Business Assistance Program will now be extended. Following on from Ms Barr's question, in that context of money available, I asked the Minister if she could provide me with a clarification of how much money is still available to assist those farmers in the Millewa region.
Minister.
Thank you, President, and I thank Ms Maxwell for a slightly more empathetic question in relation to those doing it tough in the north of our state today. It was, as I said in my previous answer, sobering but a great visit to the Millewa to meet with farmers there. James O'Day was my host. Agriculture Victoria and the VFF were also with me, and a lot of people came out to talk to me about the conditions that they're suffering. Of course, farmers in the northwest are incredibly resilient people. They're accustomed to failed seasons, but facing a second failed season, it was described to me as worse than the 1940s drought that they had experienced. So it's without doubt that it's quite dire in the Millewa. We are providing funds for farmers through the $5,000 on-farm drought infrastructure support grants, and they have been extremely popular in this region, with around half of the farmers having accessed those. There is still more of those funds available for the grants, and I would encourage everyone to look at those. I can assure you that we have extended the application period, and what happens in, I think, situations of drought like this, people, when they're right in the midst of it, can sometimes find it difficult to access the services. So making sure that they're available when people can come up for air and think about their next steps, I think is really important. So it was important to me to make sure that there's no cut-off date that's going to cut people out from accessing those. As I was wanting to detail in greater detail to Ms Barth's question, there is a lot of effort being dedicated to the northwest. We've had 6 workshops attended by over 60 farmers, and they've covered topics such as decision making in dry conditions and financial planning. AgVic are providing one-on-one consultations to provide tailored advice and ensure support and referrals to appropriate agency where issues are identified. The Rural Financial Counselling Service is providing support to both farm businesses and local businesses in the region as well. Of course, we know that the impact of drought doesn't just stop at the farm gate. There are reliant businesses on the productivity of our farmers. Importantly, we are wanting to make sure that the information is getting out there. When you are in challenging time, sometimes it can be difficult to know what support's there. So we've mailed out a booklet which details all of the support services that are available to farmers in the region, along with the local community, to ensure that everybody that needs support is directed to the appropriate place. So thank you for your question, Ms Maxwell. I can assure you that there is sufficient funds available to provide all of that support and the continuation of the grants that have been accessed by people in that region.
Ms Maxwell on supplementary.
Thank you, Ms Symes, for your in-depth answer. As my supplementary question, and given the urgency and desperation of the current situation in the Millewa, I ask, has the Minister made, or will the Minister make, representations to her counterparts in Canberra, Minister Littleproud, to consider bringing forward potential federal government assistance? I ask this in light of the fact that the farmers, including in the Millewa, are currently not able to access payments under the federal government's flagship Future Drought Fund program until the 1st of July next year.
Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Ms Maxwell for her supplementary question, and I agree. I think it's critical that all levels of governments play a part in supporting our farmers through drought and dry conditions. The number one issue that was actually raised by farmers in the Millewa last week with me was access to low-interest loans, and that's obviously a federal government program which appears to me is perhaps not exactly hitting the target that it needs to hit. So my department, Agriculture Victoria, working with the federal the federal department started those conversations, and I've had an informal reach out to Minister Littleproud, and we'll connect when our departments have had some discussions about access to those loans and making sure that there's no barriers getting in the way. In relation to the future drought fund that the federal government continue to talk about, of course, I would welcome that those funds be available earlier. Both the Leader of the National Party, Leader of the Liberals, Susanna Sheed, and Premier wrote to the Prime Minister asking for those funds to be made available earlier this year, and I would continue to advocate for those funds to be made available.